Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Mollie Eastman is the creator of her company called Sleep is a Skill and the host of the Sleep is a Skill podcast. Sleep is a Skill is a company that optimizes people's sleep through a unique blend of technology, accountability, and behavioral change. After navigating insomnia while traveling internationally, Mollie created what she couldn't find a place to go to learn the skill set of sleep. With a background in behavioral change from the Nonverbal Group, she became fascinated with the chronobiology and its practical application to sleep and our overall experience of life. Knowing the difference between a life with sleep and without, she's now dedicated her life to sharing the forgotten skill set of sleep. In the spirit of that goal, she has created a top rated podcast, written a popular weekly sleep newsletter for over 4 years, partnered with luxury hotels and lifestyle brands, and has appeared on over 150 podcasts, not including her appearance on Ours Today. You can find Mollie on her website at www.sleepisaskill.com or on social media, including Instagram at mollie.eastman. Mollie Eastman, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate this and loving your podcast. I got an opportunity to kind of review some of the episodes you've done, doing tremendously important work.
Well, thank you very, very much. I was so excited to get you on to tell you the exact same thing. It's so fun to me when I find a podcast that I feel like I know a lot about the topic and I start to listen to certain episodes. I'm like, I didn't know anything about this. And you can crush episode after episode. Your audio quality is excellent. Your
Uh,
guests are incredible. You do such a good job hosting the podcast. I absolutely love it. I don't have time to follow and subscribe to a lot of shows, but I was
sure.
absolutely sure to follow yours. I gave you a rating and review today. You do an
Ah,
excellent job. So fantastic. It's wonderful.
well, thank you. Thank you. And I will be sure to do that with the review piece for yours because I was just perusing it right before this as well. Loving what I'm seeing. So, such a fan.
Well, thank you so much. I'm such a fan of your work as well. I think you're talking to obviously somebody who's a nerd about lifestyle stuff, and our audience is nerdy about lifestyle
Yes.
stuff. So we're going to
Love
get
it.
really excited about sleep and all that stuff. The general public might not understand why this is so exciting, and I think that's one of your absolute very best skills is you're able to make sleep something that most people would probably think is this kind of like passive thing where you're not really doing anything, where it's actually incredibly active. And there's so much going on. You get so excited about it. I love it. And I think it helps people also be passionate about
Ah.
understanding their own sleep and then also to get the practical takeaways. Like, what can I do to get better sleep? You do such a great job with that.
Well, thank you for that. And listen, I mean, I know you read some of in the bio. I truly experienced a whole, first half of my life, not sleeping well, not prioritizing it, and thinking, kind of like that goldfish analogy, like the goldfish doesn't know that it's in the dirty water or whatever. Like, I just didn't know that a life where you wake up in the morning and you feel well, you feel rejuvenated, you're not dragging, headachy, feeling almost borderline hungover. I literally used to think that was how life just was. And so after going through this period of insomnia, transformed my life, I was, put on sleeping pills and all kinds of things. And I thought that this was like the only path at that point. I thought that that was just what was going to be available to me in my future. Turned out I was very wrong. And I really am committed to sharing what I believe in our modern society has become a skill set, which is sleeps and sleeping well.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a great analogy. The fish and the fishbowl would not
Yeah.
notice the water. We don't notice the air around us. It's easy to look back and say, like, okay, these are the things I was goofing up, and these are the things that I'm doing so much better with sleep now. But again, at the time, what were some of the things that you could have addressed earlier on? And how did that become an interest of yours to start to address?
So good. Well, one, simply the way I was relating to this area of life was one of a lot of labels and narratives. So for that became self-fulfilling prophecies, if you will. So I would say things like, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, it's in my genes, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Mind over matter. If you don't get a good night's sleep, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Come on, don't be weak-minded, hustle, whatever, all these sort of things. And I was relating to this area like it was just sort of a fixed reality. And I see this a lot for people where they come our way and they're like, well, I've always been a bad sleeper. And, my father never slept well or this, that, and the other, whatever. And it while we might have particular set of results at this point, what I think is truly available to us, because our society is one where we have become so divorced from some of the fundamental, often free or low cost things that can support totally transforming our sleep, that are often environmental or behavioral in nature, that when we start implementing these things again, we can actually, or maybe not even again, maybe for the first time, a lot of the things that we are likely discussing today, many people just have never really done. And I had certainly never really done those things. So what life looked like for me before was one of a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, had no clue when sunrise, sunset, just had it that, oh, as human beings, we've surpassed the need, this like, lowly need to be connected to these rhythms of nature, living in the city that never sleeps, could create our own self-created rhythms of nature. And I would just be justified and righteous and say, well, what's the big deal? Just sleep in. I make my own hours, not a problem. And having no clue what that was doing to my biology, my psychology, and more. So to begin, I think it was that kind of maladaptive psychology and relationship to my sleep, and thinking that I'm just kind of at the effect of versus in the driver's seat of my sleep results. And then once when I went to the doctors, leaving with sleeping pills. And just so any listener is clear, if you are dealing with something with your sleep, the first line treatment is not supposed to be giving you sleeping pills right now. It is actually supposed to be cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And that's also not the only thing that's available. I'm not to belittle that, because it does have great efficacy and lots of research behind it. But they're even beyond just like, do you have a sleep disorder? Are you practicing CBTI? That's often some of the two key things that you'll be met with if you're kind of lucky enough to meet with a sleep physician or sleep specialist. Those two things are a lot of what is kind of addressed or given as key tools. And those, for many people, can do a great job. But what I think is available and what's missing is this whole world of optimization, not just sleeping just for, kind of getting by, but optimizing our sleep, really looking at this like a vital sign, and starting to go in more deeply and start to live in a way that's pretty foreign to a lot of us today.
Yeah, very well explained. You mentioned the medications. Did you get any of the good stuff? Do you have any good like ambient stories for us?
Oh gosh, yes, I do. So this was all while traveling overseas. And so I grew up poor. I didn't travel a lot or any of these things. So when suddenly started traveling, jet lag was like a whole new world to me, on top of my wildly maladaptive sleep issues and mounting stress. My business and just all kinds of things were just not working. And so when putting all that together was kind of this perfect storm. So when I did go to the doctors, I went to this like little like it's this little clinic in Croatia of all places. And, the ceiling is kind of coming down, nothing against whatever, but what I was given was actually pretty old school. The first thing I was given was Valium, which I don't know, is this
Nice.
1960? But so I was given Valium the first go, and that's in kind of the benzodiazepine grouping. Then later I was given different things in different places in Budapest, a mix of Xanax, thanks, and then moved into Ambien for, I guess, both for fun. And then the Ambien kind of shifted over in Italy. They were like kind of shifting over fully to Ambien. You know, and did any of these do the trick? Absolutely not. Now, granted, I don't want to get out of the scope or bounds of, certainly medications have a time and place, but we are clear that benzos and Z drugs are really what is expected or how they are laid out is to be used for short-term use, not long-term use for our sleep. And unfortunately, there was really no game plan with how I was handed out these, and that's what we see a lot for people. I have people come my way that have been on benzos or Z drugs for decades, and it becomes a real concern, a real struggle to get off of these mindfully, and then to find people that are kind of benzo literate, if you will, and know how to approach the withdrawal process of this and tapering. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation for sure.
Wow. Wow. Well, at least you didn't like wake up in a prison cell. You hear stories like that all the time, or like wicked
Oh,
DUI stories, and like the best ambient stories. They're scary. They really are. I shouldn't laugh about it because they are scary, but like it's good that you got past some of that stuff because you can really get yourself bound up in a knot by those prescriptions. I've heard very little good stories about that. And when we're talking about
totally.
sleep, there are so many different things that we could do to optimize our sleep,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you think you're a good sleeper now or you're a terrible sleeper or you're on medications. There's a path and we can maybe get you out of that, hopefully get you out of that by just fixing a lot of the things around sleep. And one of the biggest things that we mentioned in the introduction is chronobiology. I think this
Mm,
is so important to touch on. I know this is an area of passion of yours.
yeah.
Tell us, what is chronobiology and why it's important to think about our 24-hour clock when it comes to sleep.
Yes, so important. So chrono meaning time, biology, our physiology, our biology, and so how time affects our biology. And chrono can apply to many things. So we might look at things like chronopharmacology, so the timing of our drugs or some common drugs, even things like caffeine, alcohol, THC, supplements, prescriptions, etc., that might be impacting our sleep results. So the timing and dosing of those. There's chrononutrition, so the timing of our foods and the types of foods and how there might be a more optimal time and a suboptimal time. And then we can look at, if we're taking chrono to this next step, when we talk about chronobiology as a whole, that's really the umbrella that we're approaching things from at Sleep as a Skill. Because underneath that, what we're doing is something known as circadian rhythm entrainment, fancy set of words to really just simply say we're trying to almost go back in our modern society, kind of a hybrid of how we used to live when we were outside in nature. Because the truth is, when we were outside in nature, a lot of this did get handled. That's why I always say that sleep is a skill in our modern society, because our modern society is really what is starting to take us off course. We know in this great book that just recently came out, Mapping the Darkness, very cool title, about kind of looking at the history of sleep as a research area. One of the things that they know is that sleep was really not studied in any meaningful way until around the Industrial Revolution, with one of the features being the rise of cheap and plentiful electric lights at night. And in alignment with that, we started to see insomnia rates rising. And so those lights, that combined with what I'm calling the indoor issue, the fact that now we've all gone indoors, and what this is doing for our biology, not just like, oh yeah, we're inside a little too much. No, out of 2001, the EPA did a study. They found that at least the average American was spending about 93% of their time indoors, broken down to in buildings and in automobiles, both of which obstruct these rhythms of nature and the signaling mechanisms. And so that was in 2001, before a pandemic, before smartphones, laptops, work from home revolution. Yeah, all the things, right? So it's likely a whole other, it's probably like what, if we were betting people, probably high 90s, if you will. So either way, you cut it, we're spending an inordinate amount of time indoors, and this is not how we were designed. Our biology has not caught up to this. This is another reason why another area of possible, things to get into if people are in the entrepreneurial space, building biology and the importance and emerging prevalence of this, of really taking the time to design. If we're spending so much stinking time in these spaces, but it would behoove us to make sure that as much as possible, they're serving our biology. So taking it back to this conversation of chronobiology and sleep, Well, at its core, we're really trying to start with the most powerful time giver to our circadian rhythm, which is light dark. We know that clearly, lots of research to support that it is the most powerful Zeitgeber time giver. So, with that, the most basic way to say it is that we're looking to get brighter days and darker nights. However, the practical application of that does actually take some kind of planning and setting yourself up to actually fulfill on that.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so when I'm thinking about this, I tend to think of this and explain it almost like a pendulum, where if you're getting the big bright light during the day, that pendulum is going to swing so much further over into the side. And the problem, as I
Yeah.
understand it, is if I'm waking up, I'm driving to work in the dark, I go into my office, I might
Yes.
not see the light all day, then I drive home or I work from home, like you said, which is way more prevalent now. And then
Yeah.
I stay up and I watch Netflix. So it's just like instead of getting big light and then no light, it's like I'm getting this low light during the day and then way too much light at night. And so that pendulum just can't swing in either direction. Is that an okay way to think about it?
Ah, so well said, 100%. And what's so cool about really the physics of light and starting to explore some of this is that there does appear to be a bit of this quantum effect. People might have heard of quantum biology starting to emerge, at least in the mainstream conversation a bit more. But the takeaway is that there appears to be some really profound effects by just even setting yourself up for success to even get some light. So when you're in that car, even the power of just rolling down the window to get that unadulterated, unobstructed light. And again, free intervention. When we are working from home, how we can potentially move some of the phone calls we got to have outside, how we can have little breaks throughout the day. I have a particular niche in high stakes poker. So I work with a lot of high stakes poker players. They're in what? They're in casinos designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm, an absence of windows, an absence of clocks, lots of stimuli, lots of bright lights, no real sense of what time of day it is. And so when we see groups like that, even them we're able to still interpret. It's pretty challenging. It does take some work. Like we have to get them to physically in between their breaks to go outside, which can take forever when you're a casino. They're huge, they're massive. To even find the exit is like a thing in a lot of
Good
these
call.
places. But so setting up to get some of these sunlight breaks, if we think of analogies of smokers of yesterday, if you will, they would get those smoke breaks reliably. They would make that happen, still figure out a way to get themselves outside to have those smoke breaks. We want to have some sun breaks throughout the day, not just a nice to have, but really crucial. We had Dr. Sachin Panda on the podcast, who is right, made a big ripple
So
or
good.
wave in this space, and decades of research out of the Salk Institute. So one of the things that he pointed to was some of the research in his lab, requiring at least 30 minutes to an hour outside of bright light exposure to sufficiently create melatonin in the evening to set you up for success and sufficient melatonin pulse at night. And that even in of itself can be kind of like confusing for people. Why would I need bright light to make melatonin the hormone of darkness or vampire hormone at night? Well, that's a longer conversation, but just sit with how could I bring this in as a behavioral change piece to get ourselves outside at least that 30 minutes to an hour each day.
I love that. I was going to ask you if you had any practical tips for the person
Yeah.
that said, I do have an office job, I do work from home, I do take meetings. I love answering this question. I also get frustrated when people say they can't get outside. You can comb through your calendar. I
Yes.
guarantee you can find calls that you can take on a walk. One of the best things I ever did with a manager that I had was just say, like, why are we doing this meeting inside? You're behind a desk. I feel like I'm sitting below you. It feels really condescending anyway. Why don't we go and take this weekly meeting that we're doing and let's go walk at the park next door. I'm
Love it.
side by side with you walking. So I think there's a component of that that feels like we're going through problems and sorting things out together. It was
Mm,
awesome. It was great. I loved it. Like there's so many solutions that
amazing.
people could have if they just think about taking lunch outside. Like there's so many ways that people can get out there.
Yes, 100%. And it's so funny. I'll see when we start kind of bringing that in, then it can often have this nice kind of like Simon Says effect where you're on your group Zoom call. And if you start being the leader, we talk about literally sleep leadership in our programs, and which can apply to lots of things. The people that, you're kind of setting yourself up to both have a social life and leave the, social event at somewhere to still get yourself sufficient rest, etc. That sleep leadership, often you kind of can help set the tone for others. And same with those calls. So suddenly you're in this like great blue sky background, then you might often see people following suit.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. So for the person that is heading out and they want to be outside in the sun, so they get their long sleeves and they get their sunglasses and they get their big hat and they slather
Yes.
themselves with sunscreen. Why would that not be the best idea?
Oh my gosh, so good. And this is where people start getting confused, and rightfully so. Why wouldn't we? Because for so many years, there's been these call it like kind of fear the sun, avoid the sun, for many different voices and many different perspectives. So, a couple things. One, we want to think of the sun as a drug because it really has measurable drug-like effects, phototherapy. And so when we think about any drug, then you want to be smart and mindful about the dosing and the timing and all the things. So when we look at the dosing and the timing, one, we must get that unadulterated sunlight, both in our eyes, and then that has tons of evidence. That is very clear. Where you have less research around, or it's conflicting and different types of research on the skin and photoreceptors. But there's still certain things that we want to be aware of. One, so for the getting the sunlight in our eyes, we absolutely want to take away those sunglasses to get that bright light in our eyes. I don't even own sunglasses anymore. I used to be someone that would just always be like some sort of zombie person with lots of, maybe zombie is not the right, but vampire person with the with the sunglasses. So taking those aside now, of course, asterisks, if, you're driving and certain times you might need these for safety. Always have to put these asterisks out because people just seem to get hung up on the yeah, but please don't lose the main message for the certain times, the yeah buts. But largely the average person is going to be wildly benefited by removing those sunglasses, getting that light into the eyes. It's the eyes, even the proximity is directly connected and close to that suprachiasmatic nucleus, that master clock that's going to communicate and act as that conductor to these peripheral clocks in virtually every cell and organ in your body. So trillions of little clocks, if you want to visualize it like that, that just are desperately looking to stay on time, and they need your guidance. So that's the first place, from the resetting of that master clock and keeping it in tune throughout the course of the day. So always starting in the morning, that's known as sunlight anchoring, then sampling throughout the course of the rest of the day. Then with the skin piece, well, one, we know that so many people are dealing with vitamin D, low levels of vitamin D. And how do we really need to get vitamin D? It's called out based on your Fitzpatrick scale. So finding where you fall on the skin type scale. So you might need different dosing at different lengths of time, and depending where you fall on the globe. So, don't lose the main message here just because of some of these specifics, but you can use the D Minder app to help
Thank you.
guide you on some of this. Yeah, of course, right? And then the other app, as we're talking about apps, or as I'm throwing out app recommendations, Circadian Life app is so helpful in everything we're talking about, because it will go into that chrono piece, the timing of not only light, not only dark, but also meal timing, exercise timing, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly take a look at that as well. But if so many people are dealing with low vitamin D, and we have real questions of if you just start supplementing, because people will say that, oh, no problem, I'm supplementing, I'm good. And they're in Northern Canada, and they're, suddenly they've got 90 or 100 or more levels of when they measure their vitamin D. But we're questioning what is being lost or missed when you're not getting that sunlight on your skin. So that's a longer conversation, but we are clear that there needs to be some of this interaction and interactivity with that sun, both in our eyes, and more emerging research around the skin.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The whole like supplementing thing is really murky and very difficult,
Yeah,
and I have a tough time kind of working that out as
I
well.
know.
But when you just get back to basics, like get out in the sun, expose your eyes, and I love that you said like start when the sun is low on the horizon. Like if you haven't been doing
Yes.
this, it's going to be really uncomfortable. Like I took a trip to Mexico a few years ago, and I've been practicing this for several years, and so I can be out in midday sun in the summer in Mexico, and I don't need sunglasses. I'm okay. My
Yeah.
skin is fine. I don't burn. But if you haven't been practicing this, if you can start in the winter or at least start when the sun is low in the horizon, get outside and get used to it. You can practice gazing where you're just kind of lightly looking at the horizon and letting those beams of sunlight get into your eyes. It's so important. But you can start with whatever level you're at right now.
So true. 100%. And really also getting, like, I hear some people being like, oh, well, maybe it's, a placebo effect or what have you. We've got lots of research of the power of light dating back hundreds of years. So, we've lots of knowledge around the impact and importance of light and its clear effects, not only on this conversation of sleep, but the flip side of sleep, of wake, of how much energy you have by day, how the excitatory alertness promoting kind of results of getting bright light by day. There's now beginning to be certain wearables coming out that can actually track how much light you're getting and start to make that argument very clearly and dynamically, so that as you're getting that bright light, then it will kind of make that message be heard that, okay, this is likely having making you sleepy when you're in your normal home office environment, for example. Or I'll check the wavelengths and the lux in lots of different environments. And so say like a Starbucks, one that I did the other day was like 300 lux, and tons of blue light. And this is where all these people are working all day. Like, you are not, the ability to tap in to some of that fully kind of awake state, the full functioning of our mind, body, is just being missed by being in these kind of dark environments by day, and then being upside down, because then when the night comes, that's when we flip on all the lights.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, no, to be clear, like the cloudiest day you could ever be is far more brighter, has far more
Yeah.
lux and like a really bright environment inside. So it is important to get out there. And I remember learning about heliotherapy, especially in places like Switzerland, where it was called heliotherapy, which means sun therapy. People would go there
Yeah.
like 100 years ago with like bone problems and rickets and all these things. And if they sat out on the sun decks and sunbathed, they could cure themselves, they could fix themselves. But the catch was they wouldn't get good results if they wore sunglasses. They had to be exposed to the sun fully. We knew this could cure people. It is just one of the things we've lost.
It's one of the things we've lost. Exactly. And, there's the topic of dermatology and sun is so layered, and there's such a thing there. But a couple things too that are interesting to kind of muse over or meditate on, of questions that we don't really have any good answers from our kind of establishment of the kind of if you talk to a lot of experts in the field of dermatology, they can't really reconcile with why are there so many people with, say, skin cancer and then low vitamin D. What's that about? How could that be if they're largely indoors and dealing with some of these effects that we're so concerned about and covering up about? Now, granted, always have to be mindful as people are listening. This is not medical advice, et cetera. But I can just share personally, as someone who is very Irish, very pale, fair skinned. I am someone who now never really wears sunscreen just about at all. And I'll call out if I was to, in certain times, if you're doing some crazy, like, all day out in the ocean thing, then really just using some of those things like zinc, mineral rich components, or using kind of shielding in same ways you might see like landscapers or certain people that are out in the sun routinely, kind of covering up a little bit if they need to deal with certain things like that. We can also go to animals and look at how do they manage things. And so oftentimes they'll, there's examples of, animals going out to the watering hole in the mornings, the sun is rising, they're out and about, they get their morning sun, they all the things. And then if it's a little too, hot, bright, they're seeking shade, and that's
Shade.
about it. But you're still outside. Even in the shade, you're still getting some of those benefits. It's not like throw the baby out with the bathwater and then avoid this thing that can have so much life promoting benefits. So yeah, it's a big topic.
Yeah. I could talk to you about
I
this
know.
topic for hours. I got an article rejected for a golf magazine I was writing for when I wrote an article about just be smart
Oh,
about sun exposure,
I
leverage some of
know.
these things, build up a base, try not to use sunscreen. That's a last ditch. They rejected it.
Yeah.
I was so bummed, but equally so proud. Like you can
Yes.
deal with a lot of this stuff yourself if you just
Yeah.
do what Mollie said. Like meditate on some of this stuff. Think about this stuff. We always evolved with the sun. Do you think it is a deficiency of sunscreen that is causing skin cancer? Like just think about it, come to your own conclusion. I'll just leave it at that. You
Yeah.
mentioned trackers, and I think it's very interesting that coming out with wearables that help with assessing the light situation. I'm very curious to learn about that. But let's just talk about I guess more like standardized tracking of sleep and sleep trackers. I oscillate on this topic all the time. I think on the one hand they're very helpful, on the other hand they might be distracting, or for the
Yeah.
person that wakes up and felt like, wow, I got great sleep, but now my device says I got terrible sleep, and they
Yes.
feel bad or whatever.
Totally.
Where are you on tracking?
Oh, so good. Okay. Well, one that is out, that is available if anyone wants to look into the light tracking piece. A company, I have no affiliation with them, but it's spelled LYS. So lystechnologies.io. They're looking at kind of pulling research grade information about your environment, to understand the physiological impacts of things like light, dark on your biology. And then there's rumblings of additional wearables that might even be more user friendly. Like this one, you got to clip on, and what have nothing against it, but you got to clip it on. You got to kind of think about it. And then there might be new ones that there's lots of rumblings that could be more like watch like and just kind of a part of your routine. So then you're starting to see like, okay, how much light am I actually getting routinely? And because we've become so divorced, we got to really think about this to get ourselves outside. So if that could help us gamify this a bit. So that's on the light piece. As far as sleep wearables, totally hear you. So we have concerns, right, around like the nocebo effect. So you open up your sleep tracker. Like I started tracking, one of my first sleep trackers was the Zeo back in 2012.
I had one of those.
Did you have one? Yeah, totally. It went
Yes.
out of business. It was like way before it's ahead of its time. And so, but at the time, that was during a period when I was really struggling, and it was such a disempowering thing for me because I would open up, and I think if I'm trying to remember the system, but I feel how I was always left with it was almost like, oh, I got an F, type of thing. Like
Yep.
proverbial F. And then a lack of knowledge of what to do about it. So it felt like, oh, I guess maybe there's something wrong with me. I remember testing other people around me, and then I would be like, why are they getting such better results? This is so annoying. And so this was like a whole frustrating thing. And so out of that, I was kind of had this vicious cycle. So that's an example of like what we don't want to do. However, today in 2024, while there's still lots of things on the horizon, more things coming, they'll continue to get better and better, but right now, I believe there's a way to navigate these wearables that can serve us. Most people, now there can always be asterisks of people that maybe it's maybe not the move for them right now or where they're at in their life, but for a lot of people, here's what we find. So every person we work with at Sleep is a Skill is wearing the Aura Ring at this point in the stage in the game. And what's valuable for us about that is, well, one, we have a huge emerging database of information from a sleep optimization perspective outside of research that can help us see like, okay, what really is moving the needle for people and what's just kind of like, falling on empty ears, like it's not moving, it's not doing anything as a result. So we get to gather a lot of information, but more so than that for the average user, as long as we are now going into this and approaching this like a skill set, like anything else, if you're learning to play the piano, like, okay, piano 101, and we kind of start with a blank canvas, how can we begin that way with sleep and start to test and experiment kind of n equals one component or look at sleep? And one of the things we find is pretty quickly, people tend to start influencing and moving the trends with their sleep results in various aspects of things, whether it's, many of the common things we might think about, of course, like sleep duration. So we might see people starting at whatever, 5.5, 6 hours. And then they say, oh, this is kind of important. All right. So then they start moving it up over time. And so that trends improves. But then we can get way more nuance. We can spot red flags with even consumer grade tech of things that might indicate, ooh, we might want to get tested for some sleep disorders. I am biased. I would like to see a future where everyone is being tested multiple times throughout the course of their life for sleep disorders. Because even if you didn't have, say, sleep apnea or something of that nature, you can develop it as you age because it's dynamic. So even for the people that say, oh, it was tested, it's clear, I'm good. Well, how long ago is that? What's happened since then? Have you gained weight? Have hormones shifted? There's a lot that can kind of come into play that can give you different results. So our wearables can actually help us spot some of that. Beyond that, our nervous system and the management of that can really show up, like heart rate variability, respiratory rate, body temperature, and components of blood oxygen, et cetera. So those can really give us some clues if we're starting to go into a bit of a stress response. And is it spilling and bleeding into our sleep results, which is often they're often married in a particular way.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like a helpful tool where needed, maybe not necessary all the time, but if you're trying to optimize, like I said, take steps in a positive direction, it's something that you can use to give good results. I think that's totally fine. My
Yeah.
biggest problem with the Zeo, like if you, for the listener, if you can imagine like
Yes.
a heart rate monitor chest strap, you'd wear it around your forehead. I think I only got like 1 or 2 nights of like complete data for sleep because it would always end up
Oh,
like on the floor or inexplicably like wrapped around my arms behind my back or whatever. Like it hardly ever stayed on.
me too. I know. And there's been in recent years more modern wearables that are trying to do something similar to what the Zeo is doing with a little bit newer kind of tech. And even though sadly I've found similar results where they're falling off, and particularly for women with their hair, and there's some people, oh, I love it, but they're men and they have no hair at all and they're doing great. And it's, there's and even for those people, just the practical application of it, there's still some missings. And that's why I'm definitely calling out that where we're at in the timeline of sleep research and sleep advancements, there's still some missings because there's certain things that, of course, you're going to glean from more brain-based data than you will from something on the hand or wrist. But that's not to say that we can't get a lot of information in a different capacity, because when people go in a sleep lab right now, it's really largely to be diagnostic of, do you have a disorder or not? And that's a particular type of game, and that is crucial, of course, and we want to have that, but it is not tapping into an optimization perspective. And the breadth of data that we can get with a consumer grade tracker is going to really help support this game of how are you actually living day to day with some of your behaviors and management. What happens when you have the alcohol, the THC, the eating late, the stay indoors all day, the bright light, all those things, you get to start to see how they actually shake out in your results.
I love that. Okay, I absolutely love that. Really wanted to ask you about this. It feels a little bit taboo to be talking about this, and I think it's a bigger thing than people talk about. Like when I'm working with my clients, they'll mention things that give me hints, and it's not something that people want to talk about. You did an entire episode about this, which I really appreciated. I loved learning about this topic, and I have, to be fair, I've been on both sides of this kind of argument and in this
Yeah.
type of a situation. I wanted to ask you about co-sleeping. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
there is a lot going on with co-sleeping that again people feel shameful about. If there's this like idea that you have to sleep with your partner every single night, have to be in the same bed, comes along with all kinds of different issues. One person might like to sleep earlier versus later. One person might be a lighter sleeper or a deeper sleeper. Snoring is an obvious one. Tell us what you've learned about co-sleeping and whether or not people should feel shameful if they find a solution that maybe involves, even for a transitory period, a time where people are not sleeping in the same space?
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you asked that question because it turned out I was actually really surprised. I continue to be surprised by this. This is still one of our most popular podcasts to date. And it's not as if, we had some like huge name or something on the podcast about this. It was the topic. The topic is so paramount. And so how it was kind of labeled, I think why it gets the keyword search results or what have you is because of sleep divorce and people seemingly searching, I guess, or somehow finding their way to this episode around do we get a sleep divorce? And the guest that we had on was fantastic. Highly recommend Dr. Wendy Truxell. She wrote the book on sharing the covers. And what she's doing is a great job of aiming to potentially rebrand or rename sleep divorce to a sleep alliance, which, lands in a whole different way. Like we're working together to figure this out. So, and she brought a really nice, kind of Venn diagram of possibilities, like, some of the reasons where you might want to support that sleeping together. My husband and I do sleep together in our bed and we have, like it works for us. We're on the same schedule. We've got, kind of systems in place and whatever. Now, there's a lot of times where that could make sense to explore not sleeping in the same bed during certain periods of time or for the long haul. So meaning, people are on totally different schedules and this is going to be disruptive to one or both people. Yes, why would there's the importance and the nuance of managing this like you would any other area of life. Entrepreneurs listening, like you would take a look at certain things. If they continue to be a problem, you would manage them. And so it's like madness that we might just keep suffering when we could kind of set ourselves up for success. Other things might be temporary. There must be like this Venn diagram of a temporary kind of separate sleeping period, meaning that say if we're dealing with navigating sleep apnea as an example, the other person's like snoring and they're trying to figure out the CPAP. And this can often take some time to like find the right treatment. Sometimes it's like starting with the CPAP and it's not quite working the whole night or it's falling off. And now we're going to test like oral appliances and all these things. It can just take some time. So that could be a period for a temporary time or temporary shifts or kids. Pets also wake us up quite a bit. So there's the consideration of who is in our bed and is it making sense to share the covers as that book points to, or is it becoming like a problem?
We'll tag that episode in the notes. I found it to be
Oh,
so
sure.
helpful
Oh,
for people.
good.
Just the tips and the things that she was saying, like, look, communication is the biggest thing. Let's talk
So
about
good.
this. Let's get this out in the open. We don't need to have shame around this if this isn't
Yeah.
working in this part. There's other benefits of like, meeting your wife in the morning after you haven't seen her or whatever. Like,
Yes.
there's so many things to consider. And so I do feel like it's more prevalent than we think, and people aren't talking about it as much. And so I think it's fair for those people to be able to have those conversations and try to work something out.
110%. I couldn't agree anymore. I think there's concerns because we have seen people bring in like some sort of morality or ethics or kind of judgment into the relationship game of this, and some sort of stigma about, oh, what's happening with their relationship? They sleep in separate bedrooms and what have you. But at the shakeout, I loved one of her messages at the end of all this, and what we see all the time with our clients is as far we know that it's clear, poor sleep affects just about every domain of life. And we see that evidence if you go to PubMed and put sleep and just about anything that's important to you, including interpersonal communication, including the ability to read faces with a level of kind of knowingness or accuracy, our EQ seemingly getting a bit of a hit or arguably being impaired if we're not sleeping well. So how is that going to serve our relationship? It's just systemically problematic.
Yeah, great point. I love that. Okay, so you are a sleep coach. I will coach people on certain aspects of sleep, but that's not the way I approach things. As a personal trainer and a nutrition coach, we're normally starting, by talking about, metabolic health, and let's get somebody on the right movement, the right exercise program, and the right eating plan. I notice definitely that if people can sort those things out, sleep will largely improve or maybe even fix itself in a lot of different areas. Obviously, there's specific things we can talk about, like blue blocking glasses and changing the lighting in your home and all those different things. Will you talk a little bit about what you've learned about metabolic health and sleep and how those two things relate?
Ah, so good. I just love your questions. Because these are so prevalent. Like we're all dealing with these things, including in certain, kind of estimations as far as how many people are dealing with metabolic dysfunction. And some of our estimates in the United States looking shaking out like 88% of Americans, or even in other studies, like 92% of Americans. However you shake it out, it's a large group of us dealing with some form of metabolic dysfunction. So if that's the case, what is that spidering into? Well, it certainly appears to be spidering into our sleep. And in what really relatable and annoying way? Well, one of the ways that I see is wake ups. And that's probably one of the most common reasons people come my way is they're so annoyed with 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5, whatever, wake ups, and they're over it. And so with that, people might practice meditation in the middle of the night and all these things. Great, totally. But also like, why is this happening? So we want to and kind of pan out and then see first, whenever we have people coming our way with wake ups, we always address with that testing and making sure we're not stepping over sleep disorders, which certainly will wake you up if you're snoring, if you're dealing with apneas, lots of things to set you up for more fragmented sleep possibilities. But then one of the second most common things that we go to is looking at our blood sugar regulation. So we'll often have people wearing continuous glucose monitors, and we can overlay. We actually did this with a small focus group with Levels Health. And so we had people wearing the CGMs and the Oura Ring, and then we would see pretty reliably some of these drops in glucose throughout the course of the night in the wee hours in the morning, and then a subsequent wake up in alignment with that. And often the types of wake ups where they're kind of plagued with being up now, and that would make sense because it's a bit of a stress response if your body thinks that it's crashing in this kind of need for glucose. And so in those moments, we can start to reverse engineer. Well, why is this happening? Well, what's happening? Oh, look at if we mirror how your glucose is acting and kind of performing throughout the course of the day, glucose insulin relationship, they can get much more layered with leptin, ghrelin, and all kinds of things. But if we look at that and say how we are by day often gets mirrored in the nights, then it gives us an access to a pathway for action to address the days so that we can support the nights.
I love that. You hear about those blood sugar crashes and people being absolutely like awake, and that's the best time to go get a bowl of cereal, turn on all the lights in your house, walk downstairs for a giant bowl of Lucky Charms. Like that is just not going to end well for anybody. But you hear those stories all the time because you do have that severe crash, and what does your body do? Of course, it wants more glucose.
Of course, right? Of course it wants that. And so if so many of us are dealing with this and these things, if you really want to get meta, these are all related. So living in darkness by day, not having kind of sufficient sunlight by day, then being under electric light at night, which we know can be impact certainly our circadian health, but impact cortisol levels, lower melatonin, all of these things can set you up for a destabilizing effect of that glucose the subsequent day. Now you got this vicious cycle and it's even harder. So these things are kind of related.
Yeah, I love that. Our kind of area of things we like to talk about dietarily around here, are things involved with like the ketogenic diet or carnivore diet or whatever. And so people that want to do that have a desire or maybe a need health wise to be able to push into that. We'll help them with that as much as we can. And one of the complaints I would get a lot very early on is like, man, I'm waking up at like 4 a.m. I'm wide awake. I can't go back to sleep. Ever since I changed my diet, I'm waking up. And
Yeah.
I took that at first, like, oh yeah, that sucks. And then you start asking a few more questions. You're like, well, wait a second, like, were you tired during the day? They're like, oh, well, no. I'm like, did you take a nap? Like, oh yeah, I used to take naps all the time. No, I don't. I feel like I've got really good energy. And it's almost like their sleep is compressed because it's becoming more efficient. Is that something you've ever noticed or come across?
Oh yeah, that's such a layered one for sure. So um here's what I can just share too. Some of the things that we see on the ground with some of our wearable data is exactly what you're pointing to. As people might shift and change their diet, we can often see diet show up in our sleep results for sure, and in varied ways. So, I've seen lots of people they go sugar free, they cut out processed foods. There's lots of ways that you might see your choices of the quality of that food. We actually know there's certain studies that point to processed foods and sleep apnea upticking. And so there's some real measurable changes that we know about. And then certainly for things like ketosis, then we might see an uptick of sometimes. Here's what we just common trends. Sometimes less shorter sleep, and they might have certain wake ups, but then it appears as if, at least on the trackers and then subjectively of kind of feedback, that it looks like quality sleep and sometimes an uptick in some of the readouts for deep sleep. Full disclosure on the wearables, some of the least accurate information is from the sleep stage classifications. So just knowing that, like, of everything you're looking at, the deep sleep and the REM, light sleep, and those call outs, those are just lower on and we talked about some of the reasons. It's not on the head. That's how we're understanding our brain state for those sleep components. And so we're kind of missing some of that. So it's making like its best guess, but it is getting a lot better. And Aura is one that now is able to it has 1,500 nights against a sleep lab. So it is able to kind of legally say that it's like having a sleep lab on your finger. So that's kind of a big deal. And so now still it's in the 79% accuracy for sleep stage classifications. But remember that in a lab, it's still only in the mid 80s as far as agreement of what stage you're even in if you're in a sleep lab. So there's still questions even there, and that's the gold standard. So, so having said that, we do tend to see with things like keto, we might see an uptick for some people in deep sleep, especially. There might be some of those wake ups, but then we tend to see that even out a bit later. Now, I'm not meaning to say that that's going to happen for everyone, but we do seem to see that trend. And then often I'll get to see some people that are become metabolically flexible, where they're able to kind of flex in, flex out, and then they're not dealing with some of those issues that they were dealing with, kind of like the keto flu and all those symptoms that when it's super new to them.
Yep, I love that answer. As always, really important to the listener to experiment with this, try this out. Being super strict with any particular diet for a while might work great. If you do it too long, that might also not work great. And so we hear people that maybe have cortisol issues that have to reintroduce carbohydrates. That can be a thing. So just keep that in mind and
Yes.
always be willing to experiment. I love that you end your podcast by asking a certain series of questions. I'm going to choose my favorite one of the 4
Yes.
questions that you ask. If I were to check out your sleep space, what kinds of things would I see?
Oh my God, I love it. Yes. So good. Okay. So, and I think you're probably pointing to our question on what's on your nightstand, which and then it will extend to like the whole area. Well, what's really interesting, and I've seen this through line with all of these people now that we've asked this question of, it's been interesting the number of people that also point to kind of a minimalistic, answer, and that's really what mine has become as well, and partly from that building biology side of things. So I'm looking to make sure that I don't have a lot of things plugged in around me, a lot of extra, if you're concerned about EMFs, I know it's a controversial topic, but it's, why would you even risk it? In my opinion, while you're sleeping, there's no need for you to be exposed to those things. So why not unplug, turn off Wi-Fi, like just, have all of those things not there. Those not dealing with those. So I don't have some of the things you'd be not seeing would be there's no like lamps on the side of the nightstand. So I have certain red lights that have like little interesting settings where you can kind of push it and it will kind of glow red for a period of time, but then it can slowly kind of simmer itself, but it's all, battery operated and rechargeable. So those are different ways so that we're not getting a lot of EMFs. red light. And then I do have things for like naps and what have you. So I might have like brain tap. I've got certain things for vagus nerve stimulation, and certain things are available, but I do this more often like midday. So for me, what I'm so grateful for is that now for me, when I get into bed, I am like tired and I fall asleep and then I wake up and then I'm out of there. So I really am not spending so much time in the bedroom, which is, really great. You see like languish in those spaces. Additionally, I do though highly recommend cooling mattress toppers. That is one thing, and you can even improve upon the EMF setting for that. So there's ways that you can take the actual kind of hub and put that far from the bed, if you're concerned about that. But I see that make a measurable change for so many people with their wearables and my own. And then use things like U blockout, and U blockout is something where then you can just, it's very gratifying because then you could just like pull down the shades and then it's total blackout. I have a client that called it like, he said something funny. It was like prison lockdown or something. Cause it just goes like, it's like so dark suddenly. So that's very fulfilling. And then, so doing that, then I've got red lights littered to the bathroom, like motion lights. So then when I walk to the bathroom, those turn on. I've got a plug-in one in the bathroom. I've got air doctors, like an air doctor and a Jasper in the bedroom for air purification. And then books, red light, kind of snake lamp thing for the books itself. And then and then I have the intake breathing. If you've tried that, it's really fun. Like the magnets to expand the nose, and then mouth tape. That's available. I don't use an eye mask in the bedroom just because it's so dark, which I love. But if I'm traveling, then I do use that. The air purifiers make enough of a noise, so I don't need to do like a white noise with those. But if I am traveling, I have like a travel size white noise deal. Some people like that, some people don't. I don't like earplugs personally. I don't like the sound of like your own body, like the heart rate, the heartbeat, and all that stuff. But some people love those, so those could be great for them.
Awesome. That is such a good practical guide, and people get so much out of that list and out of this episode. This has been an awesome chat. I've really enjoyed myself. You have so much passion around this topic. It's been fantastic. Mollie, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Oh, love that. Well, thank you. Yeah, so people can go to sleepisaskill.com, and there they can take free sleep assessment, get immediately information back on what they can do to support their sleep. They can sign up for a sleep newsletter. They can listen to our sleep podcast. They can then, if they're struggling, we have a sleep audit. So if you're tracking with your sleep, we can audit your wearable data and give you things that you can do right away. Then you can join our cohort if you're looking for further support, 8 weeks long, and go through that wearing an Oura ring. And then finally, one-on-ones where we test you with sleep tests. We test different 13 vials of blood, urine analysis, different things to kind of get a whole battery of information around what's going on with your health and sleep to really, kind of change the game.
That's fantastic. Well, just like your podcast, your website is wonderful and has tons of amazing information. It's really, really well done and very simple. The assessment is great, takes about 2 minutes. Awesome to go through. So, yeah, thank you so very much for all of the knowledge and wisdom you've acquired around this topic. It's so very important. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting you at the Hack Your Health conference
Yes.
this month in Austin. It'd be really great to meet you. But yeah, thank you so very much for everything you've done. This has been a great conversation, and you really brought a lot of great information for us. So thank you so very much. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We appreciate you.
Same. The feeling is mutual, and I cannot wait to meet in real life. That's going to be amazing.
It'll be great. It'll be great. Well, thank you very much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.